Bertrand Russell noticed it almost 100 years ago when he wrote this in his essay In Praise of Idleness. Not only do we have machines, but we have artificial intelligence today. There's really no need for one person to work for 8 hours a day, but instead of being excited about it, we are afraid that AI will take away our jobs.
That's what it's for.
That's why we have it. That's why we have technology. Not to become better servants, but to become free humans. Personally, I think that any system that requires us to work 8 hours a day just to survive is not an optimal system for humans. Humans shouldn't want to be productive and specialized. We're not machines. What we really need is to be free, to enjoy life, to create freely, not for profit, to follow our curiosity, to work on our passion projects, to rest, to spend time in nature with friends and family, to learn about whatever we're interested in, not for what will further our careers, to acquire skills just for fun and fulfillment, not profitable skills that will help us sell our time more expensively. We need to be spending our short time on Earth doing what lights us up, what makes us feel alive, and not repeating the same dull routine day after day. So we don't want full-time employment, we want a full-time life. And the goal is not to grow the economy, the goal is to shrink work needed to survive and grow our quality of life and become free-roaming animals instead of caged animals that can't even afford to buy our own cage anymore, working the same hours that we did 150 years ago. During the COVID pandemic, life as usual stopped and people had more time to think, and many realized that life is short, that they don't want to go back to the normal grind. And some people started their own businesses or decided they don't want to go back to the office and waste an hour or two on commute every day. And the capitalists didn't like that. They thought that we need to be scared back into obedience by raising unemployment. You have to hear this guy. He's an Australian real estate developer who became rich by borrowing money from his rich grandfather. And this is what he had to say that probably represents what many other capitalists think. But yeah, they don't say this openly and clearly.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years. And we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50% in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around.
You son of a bitch!
I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude.
You threaten my people with slavery and death.
And that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
Well, where I'm from, that's called slavery.
So capitalists need people to feel unsafe, scared of losing our jobs, lucky to be able to serve them. And we have to have the homeless too, so the workers see what can happen to us if we obey our masters. Basically, in capitalism, most people have to always be on the verge of homelessness, so we are disciplined and obedient. Also, a worker scared of getting fired will not ask for a raise or criticize the employer. The system wouldn't work if there were full employment. And the capitalists want us to feel like it's a privilege for us to work on their passion projects instead of our own. I also felt for Elon Musk's talk that he's working all the time, but he's not working at all. There's nothing else he would rather do, so he's making his dream projects come true. Work is what you're doing for money because you have to in order to survive. Okay, this is biblical, not historical, but the people who wrote the Bible didn't see work as virtuous. So in the Bible, work and pain were punishments given to humans after they disobeyed God by eating from the tree of knowledge, which was a symbol of forbidden wisdom. So work was seen as punishment for curiosity and disobedience. In pre-industrial times, so before 1800s, there were no fixed hours, and most people worked in agriculture or home-based crafts, and work hours followed natural light and seasons. They didn't have to punch in every morning. And the demand for continuous labor came with factories and machines. So factory owners wanted to maximize production time and keep machines running 24/7. So workers that included children at the time, they were forced to work up to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. And my shift on Carnival Cruise Line's food and beverage department was 15 hours every day and without any days off, because we were preparing at the time for USPH inspectors to come, so we had this extra cleaning every day after the shift. Otherwise, it was 10 to 11 hours a day, a normal shift. And this preparing for USPH lasted for at least a month, and somebody did sue them and they had to pay a huge fine. The idea of the 8-hour day was first popularized by a Welsh textile worker and reformer, Robert Owen, who came up with the slogan 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. That was in 1817, so exactly 208 years ago. And that was visionary for the time. By the way, rest means sleeping during the night, not reading a book in hammock. And nobody came up with anything better since. And Mr. Owen didn't count in the commute and the meal preparation and child rearing and housekeeping. That's an additional 8 hours at least. And then how about 8 hours working on your creative projects? That leaves like zero time for labor. And it took many decades of strikes and protests to achieve this goal of 8-hour shifts. Henry Ford went from 9 to 8-hour shifts in 1914, and he doubled the salaries because he saw it improved productivity and worker loyalty, and it reduced turnover. Henry Ford said that leisure is an indispensable ingredient of a thriving economy. Well, he needed people to have money to buy those cars so they can drive themselves to work. There have been some trials of shorter work weeks in Sweden, New Zealand, Iceland, even Spain, and the result of these trials were stable or even higher productivity and happier and more focused employees and lower absenteeism. Most capitalists don't care about well-being of their employees. In call centers, they don't offer you permanent contracts because they know they will burn you out and they don't want to pay for your recovery. So we shouldn't wait for them to shorten our work weeks and think about our health and quality of life. There was a higher cost of hiring additional people, but there were also less unemployed people. So the government should definitely subsidize this to lower unemployment if the company owners can't afford it or don't want to like reduce their profits or the CEO's huge salaries and bonuses. So 8 hours a day, I think that's inhumane. And if you ask me, it should be considered a violation of human rights. I'll hopefully be unemployed for the rest of the year because I worked hard for 3 months in Germany as a caregiver and I was saving 95% of my salary. And still, without a job, I don't feel I have enough time for all of my creative projects. Like, I haven't painted since January and I don't even have kids. And I really don't understand who has time for 8-hour shifts. If we were supposed to like eat chocolate and have sex 8 hours a day, that would be also inhumane. Anything for 8 hours a day is inhumane.
How about sleep?
So Australia was one of the earliest places to legally implement 8 hours days in 1856. American capitalists were tougher, so there was Chicago's Haymarket Affair. That was a violent confrontation between police and labor protesters on May the 4th, 1886. And so that rally started peacefully, but then the bomb was thrown at police and there were deaths and injuries on both sides. That incident became a symbol of the international struggle for workers' rights, and it's commemorated still today on May the 1st, International Workers' Day. And let's just protest on the 1st of May at least every year for 4-day work weeks or 4-hour work days better. I'd be okay with 4 hours a day, because yeah, that's not too much even for a shitty job with a shitty boss. Actually, any amount of hours is too much if you have a shitty boss.
You're fired.
John Maynard Keynes, in his famous essay Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren from 1930, he predicted that by around now we'd be so productive thanks to machines and science that people only need to work a couple of days a week. He thought we'd then shift to what really matters, like friendship, beauty, art, love, contemplation, similar to what ancient Greeks and Romans thought, but they did think that slaves should work. A problem? I think people are watching TV today because they're just too tired after work to spend their free time doing anything that requires energy. It's not that they don't know what to do. And how convenient, they get to see the capitalist propaganda on TV all the time and the commercials for products to spend their salaries on. In case there's anything left after paying for food and shelter. In different cultures throughout history, especially non-capitalist cultures, people saw leisure as a virtue, as a moral good. Even in capitalist societies, when people win more time because they retire, go on a sabbatical, or work part-time. They can afford it. Not many can, or can't work because of pandemic. Many people discover new talents and purposes, but Keynes was right in the sense that modern humans were trained or shaped by centuries of work discipline, and they could struggle to handle unstructured freedom. And that's not because we're inherently incapable of it, but because we are trained to derive our worth from productivity and to see leisure as laziness. Also, if you for 35 years that you were employed haven't had much free time for hobbies to discover, develop your talents or interests, you kept busy all the time just to survive, how are you suddenly gonna know what to do with your free time? Capitalism thrives by keeping us busy, anxious, consuming. We even consume entertainment instead of actively entertaining ourselves and each other. We're trained into becoming productive machines, and then suddenly at 65 we're supposed to become free humans, like for the first time in 50 years, and enjoy leisure all the time. That's not a good idea. I mean, some people adjust well to retirement, but many don't, and many don't even live long enough to retire. It seems to me sometimes that humans are afraid of freedom. And Erich Fromm, in his book The Escape from Freedom, in that book he said that modern people often feel overwhelmed by the responsibility that comes with freedom. So they unconsciously escape from it by conforming, obeying, numbing themselves with alcohol, drugs, television, junk food. So, well, that's not what he said in the book. So instead of embracing freedom, we try to escape from it by submitting to authority, conforming to society, losing ourselves in meaningless routines or ideologies. And Erich Fromm taught that most people are not even aware of their need to conform. They live under the illusion that they follow their own ideas and inclinations. And for Fromm, true freedom means self-realization. He believed that we can embrace freedom in a healthy way by becoming fully ourselves, acting authentically. So using our freedom to love, to create, to think, to participate meaningfully in society instead of escaping. So capitalist morality, born of slavery and obedience, doesn't prepare us to enjoy or use our leisure well. And systems that prevail on this planet, like capitalism and authoritarian socialism, that allow a small minority to benefit from the overwork and exploitation of the majority, where power and wealth concentrates at the top and the majority is not free. And those kind of systems exploit this human weakness, this fear of freedom and tendency to submit ourselves easily to authoritarian rule and resign our sentiments and passions to those of our rulers, as David Hume put it. So the political systems benefit from keeping us incapable or unprepared to live freely. We need schools, both elementary and high schools and universities, to teach us how to self-actualize, how to become fully ourselves, how to use our time wisely, what really makes us happy, how to live well, how to do fun stuff and creative stuff, how to get into flow state, how to play, how to have good relationships, how to live off grid so we know we can if we want to, how to develop our talents, and not how to be productive cogs in the machine. Yes, we do need doctors and nurses and caregivers and scientists, teachers, but nobody should have to work 8 hours a day. What we're doing now, for example, those people who we need most rested, we make them work 24-hour shifts, like surgeons and truck drivers. How absurd do things have to get before we feel it's bad enough, it's time for a change? We have to reduce by half at least what's considered full-time work. And we have to have a lot of leisure time our entire lives so we can learn how to be humans, how to be free, how to be ourselves, instead of being productive machines.